Hi, my name is Beth Fawcett, and today I am going to attempt to answer the question for you, what Lexile is this text? So a little bit of background information about Lexile levels. They're basically a reading level. So anytime anything is written, it can be assigned a Lexile level, which means it can be appropriate for people who can read at that particular Lexile level. Now, where Lexile levels are used most often is in teaching. And it answers the question, is this particular resource on this particular level? For instance, ACTs and SATs their reading passages are written at a specific Lexile level that's typically either high school or college level. And for the business world, you can generate content that can cater to different types of audiences. So if your content creation is geared towards students, you can make sure that you're writing at a student's level. If your content's geared for adults, you could then make sure that your content is written for an adult level audience. Now, how I went about answering this question was I used some supervised learning techniques. Now, what that means is I used data that already had a Lexile level assigned to it, and I used those particular labels to help me whenever I was training my model. Then I took books, full-length books, and I passed those books in. I separated them out into paragraphs or topic areas using a really cool library called text tiling. Then after I went through and separated everything out into paragraphs, I took each paragraph and shortened each word in that paragraph to its basic root word using a tool called lemmatization. And whenever I was lemmatizing, I only kept the top 10,000 words that were referenced the most. Now, that sounds like a lot of words, but I also used almost 300 different full-length, I'm talking like 200-page plus books. And then once I had that done, I passed all of my data into a neural network. Now, throughout this process, I was cleaning as I went. That's called scrubbing. I explored the data, and you'll see some of those visualizations today. I even have a good representation of what my model looks like or is starting to look like. And then I have an example of an interpretation for you. Now, this is my basic beginning data. I separated out the various books into early elementary, late elementary, middle school, and high school. So I have 4 different categories that I'm working with. I focused on students, and the reason why actually is because whenever I was going to look to see what adults were reading, most of the news articles that I found were actually written for the middle school level. So that's why I didn't expand into the more collegiate levels. I actually found too that academic papers are written mostly at the middle school level as well. And what you can see in these 4 graphs here, these are histograms that kind of show the frequency of something called a vector. Now, a vector is the distance between one word and another. In other words, what you're seeing is kind of like the frequency of how similar the data is. Now, what the bad news about these graphs is that they all look the same, which means separating out these categories might be kind of difficult. However, the good news is you can see that there's some variation to this data. Here I have for you, so this is kind of like data in one dimension. What does it look like, just the basic data? Then here I have for you 2-dimensional data. So the red data is for high school, the green is for middle school, the orange is for late elementary, and the blue is for early elementary. And we're starting to see these different types of clusters. I'm really curious to see and understand how this bottom cluster is separate from this upper cluster. I have a feeling that this bottom cluster is where we're getting into the nitty-gritty differences between each of the data sets. It should be noted that there's a lot less blue here than there is in the upper cluster. And so as we're moving from this one dimension to a second dimension, we're starting to see this data spread out. And that trend continues into a third dimension. We have the same colors for the same categories as before, and we're actually starting to see some data pulling out from each other, which means that these categories genuinely are different based on how I set up my model. Now, I have for you today one dimension, two dimensions, three dimensions. I went to 10,000 dimensions with my model. And at the very end, I had a testing accuracy of 82%. Now, what that means is any text that I pass in, it is likely to be predicted correctly 82% of the time. And I have an example for you on the right-hand side. At the top, you'll see the news article. It's from the Associated Press, and it's titled, "Stop Fighting, Atlanta Sobriety Test Quickly Turned Deadly." This is a news article that came out 2 weeks ago, if you were watching this in late June of 2020. And on the bottom of the page, basically what I did is I just highlighted everything in this article. I pasted it into this box here, following the directions, copy the text you'd like to test, then right-click in the box below and select Paste as Plain Text. And I hit Submit, and this is the result that I got out. This article, based on the model that I've generated, is at the middle school level. One of the things that I'm looking to do is to take this wonderful app that works locally on my computer, meaning I've built it on my personal computer, and I'd like to put that online for you guys to be able to access everywhere. I'd also like to generate a regression model that will tell you exactly what Lexile you're working with instead of what general age group that you're targeting. I would also love to take in a specific text, much like this one, and let's say I wanted the same information to be available to the high school category or even the early elementary. And I would like to write something that can make that type of prediction to switch from one category to another. I would also like to possibly set up an unsupervised model to see if I get the same type of accuracy or if I can improve on this 82%. This is my contact information. If you have any questions for me, thank you for watching my presentation.